All right, so let's keep going with our invertebrate animals. So, from flatworms evolved roundworms. And again, the evidence of their order of evolution is also in the fossil record. So, um, so the flatworms, they were exploiting and using nutrients on the surface, but there was also nutrients underneath the surface of the sand and the bottom of the water that they were living in, because all this life so far we're talking about was all evolving inside in the ocean, in the water somewhere, also rivers and things like that. And so in order to get under the ground, those flatworms started to evolve a rounder shape, which was better for burrowing and going into the ground to get those resources and nutrients, and probably hide from predators as well. So we think they evolved to become round for better burrowing, for resources, and for hiding. And they also developed the first organ systems. So of all the animals, we have many types of organ systems. These roundworms evolved the first organ systems. Pretty sure it's a basic digestive system. And they also have ganglions, so they do not have brains yet. It's still that basic sort of cluster of nerves close to a brain, but we're going to get the first brains with segmented worms. And so these are a more advanced species of worm, and this is actually a giant earthworm. So obviously much bigger than we get here in the United States. I think this is in Europe. And the roundworms started to evolve segments, so we can actually see the segments in these more ocean-based segmented worms. So it's really can see the separation here. And they also have these structures around the outside, these kind of bristles, which we'll talk about. So then the question becomes, okay, why did they evolve segments? And the reason why is because it makes them stronger. So for digging, basically. So that's why earthworms are so good at digging and moving through the earth, is because these segments allow more connections for muscles. So the more segmentation there is, the more muscles that can connect to these different segments, allowing them to be stronger. And these organisms have evolved the first body in segments, and we're going to talk about other segmented animals later. They evolved the first brain, so things like earthworms do have what's considered a brain. And those bristles are called setae, and those are believed to have evolved to kind of help with movement as well as protection. And on earthworms, they're really small. They're more like little hairs, but on these ones in the ocean, you can see they're really big. And you can even see them on this one here. Almost looks like legs on this one, but they're not. So here's a weird ocean segmented worm, and you can really see the setae bristles here that are going to help it burrow. There's definitely some weird ones, so here comes some weird pictures. This is the head of a weird segmented worm. Actually, this photo was taken by a scientist at the college that I went to. If you look down here, it says UCSB, so hopefully some of you will go there someday. I've talked about it before. Campus is basically right on the ocean. Doesn't get much better, so hope some of you someday will be going to UCSB like I did. And but yeah, really weird sort of heads. Here comes some more weird ones. So here's a couple segmented worms, and then this is the head of one of them, and to me it looks like some kind of clown monster, like from the It movies or something, if you guys know what those are, and just weird googly eyes, and kind of has like a clownish, kind of scary clownish look to it. This is also a segmented worm, although it looks nothing like those other ones. They've kind of evolved where their segments kind of fan out, and they're in tubes, I think, these ones, and the segments are for picking up food particles in the water. So not really for travel and burrowing, but more for picking up food. All right, and then eventually mollusks evolved, and this is where it gets tricky, like the sequence of evolution, because things now have established there's so many different invertebrates in the ocean now that branching them correctly is probably going to take more genetic research and things like that. Because to me, on the left here, some of my favorite animals are what are called nudibranchs, and these look like essentially more advanced flatworms. So I sort of feel like flatworms might have evolved into nudibranchs, and then the nudibranchs evolved maybe into the other mollusks. This is very hypothetical for me. I haven't done like tons of research, but I'm pretty sure this makes sense. They don't really function like segmented worms, which is what we were just talking about. And these just look like elevated and sort of enlarged flatworms. So here's where the line, the evolutionary line, it's more about like branching now. So anyway, really cool nudibranch, and actually these are its eyes. And then these things on the back are actually its gills. And then this animal is called Nautilus, and I think they have the largest eye compared to their body size. So compared to their relative body size, I think they have the biggest eyes. And actually the fossils of Nautilus go back hundreds of millions of years, I'm pretty sure at least, and are almost identical to how they look today. And so they're almost considered like living fossils. And I actually have this kind of silly movie. I used to play in class, and then it just came off a little more for maybe junior high level. It's kind of goofy, but it's interesting, and it talks about some animals that are almost like living fossils, in that their fossils look exactly the same as the animals now. And they included, what were the animals? There was Nautilus, like this guy, scorpions, cockroaches, horseshoe crabs, which we're going to talk about later because they're not crabs, actually, and dragonflies. Those were the 5 animals that are considered living fossils. And that being said, I would expect that question on your style assessment this week to make sure you guys are paying attention. Okay. So there's a lot of different types of mollusks, and so some only have the simple ganglion, but some have brains, and actually most scientists think the smartest invertebrate animals are actually octopus, which fall into this category. And they've put them through like really amazing like mazes where there's doors and latches and all these weird things, and the octopus will figure it out and get through it, and then they put it through again and it does it faster, which shows that it's learning. And so generally considered octopus, which are a type of mollusk, are considered the most intelligent invertebrate animals, and as well as more intelligent than many vertebrate animals, like smarter than fish, which are vertebrate animals. So just because something's an invertebrate animal does not mean it's not intelligent or advanced. And we've talked about that before with like the ants that take care of the caterpillars. We've talked about that, and that ants can be very intelligent too. So we got some first here. So they evolved the first mantle. So they don't have skin. They have what's called a mantle, which is a body tissue that actually creates a shell. And they have the first and only shell, which is a hard secretion that they secrete, which means kind of like ooze out of their body for protection and support. So these are nudibranchs. And we can see the gills on the outside, and nudibranchs, their shell is on the inside. So again, anything that we say has a shell, if it's not a mollusk, it is not a shell. So turtles and stuff, that is not a shell. Crabs, that is not a shell. And we'll talk about that later. Here's some other really cool nudibranchs. So part of why I like nudibranchs is they're just so alien. And I feel like if an astronaut went into space and came back with this one here, this white one, and said, I found an alien in space, like people would believe it. They're that weird. And so the oceans are full of alien-like animals. Here's some other really cool nudibranchs, and here you can actually really see the eyes on this one, as opposed. Oh, actually, you can see the eyes on this one too, right there. So again, and a lot of them tend to have gills on the outside also. Here's just another really cool-looking nudibranch. Got lots of pictures. Another one. That one's in even better detail. Just super cool looking. Again, this one just looks really weird. Almost doesn't look like an animal. So again, nudibranchs are some of my favorite animals. So we got some cool pictures. Here's some weird ones. Look like they're made out of like Play-Doh, or I think, what is it called? Phyllo clay or something like that. So those are super weird and cool looking. And then these ones actually aren't limited to like the ground and can go swim around, and will go out and hunt jellyfish or jellies. Other types of mollusks include snails and slugs. So snails have the shell on the outside, and slugs make their shell on the inside. And this is a 7-inch long banana slug. And normally now I'd ask, like, does anybody know the college that has a mascot of a banana slug? And sometimes people know it is actually UC Santa Cruz. And that's where my sister went to school, and she was actually there when they made that the mascot, and they allowed the students to vote. And I was probably in junior high, maybe a freshman, maybe your guys' age, when they got to vote, and the students were allowed to vote. And the vote was between seals, I think, seals and banana slugs. And I think generally the students thought it would be funny to make their mascot the banana slug, and that's what it is. Here are some really giant snails. So maybe some of you have eaten like escargot, and here you can imagine why some people eat snails. They might be able to get a pretty good meal out of these big snails. Okay, then we have like clams and oysters and things like that. And so this is a giant clam. These can be like 3 feet long, and they're actually really dangerous. I'm going to talk about that for a second, just so you guys know if you ever see these and go snorkeling or something. And they don't like eat you or anything, but people go like see them and go, oh wow, look at this like really cool giant clam, right? And they reach in here because they want to touch it, and it actually clamps really fast, and you cannot open it. Either you have to wait for it to open itself, or they have to use like crowbars and tools to like open it up to get somebody's like hand out, or if their foot went in there. And so there have definitely been people who have drowned because they did not know. If they stepped on it, it probably wasn't too deep, but I think mostly it's when people reach in there, and this person has a scuba tank on, so they might survive long enough to get help. But if somebody just kind of dove down with a snorkel on and was like, oh, neato, let's touch this, they can get trapped and die, and essentially you have to kind of rip your arm out. So there's your warning. Just be careful if you see warning signs at a beach that has giant clams. This is a scallop, if you've ever eaten scallops, and actually all these little circles here are the eyes. So it has lots and lots of little eyes, and kind of just a cool, kind of weird looking image in here. Okay, then we have different things with tentacles, like octopus and squids, and here's our nautilus again. And usually I'll ask, okay, who knows what these blue rings mean? And usually somebody knows that it means it's poisonous. So it's dangerous, actually. And so a lot of people don't maybe know that there's poisonous octopus, but there is. Here's a squid doing a really cool light display. So their cells can change color and even create light, which is really amazing. And it's usually, I think, to attract their prey. So their prey see the colors and think it's little organisms to eat, and then the squid gets them. Okay, here's an octopus cruising around, so kind of gives you an idea of what their body looks like. And now I'm going to tell a story about when I found an octopus. So again, I told you my family has a house in Kauai, and that we live close enough to the beach where this kind of hidden beach in Kauai where I'm actually able to go out there all by myself. A lot of people don't know it's there. And go snorkeling, which is one of my favorite things to do, and look for cool animals. And it basically looked exactly like this, same colors and stuff. And I found an octopus once. It's the only octopus I've ever found in the wild. And it was hiding from me and in the rocks. And so I very carefully took a stick and was just trying to gently kind of coax it to come out, and just being very careful, but I really wanted to see it and just was hoping it would come out. And it finally did. And when it did, it actually squirted me. So you guys know they say it like squirts ink and stuff like that. So I got like squirted. And I'll tell you right now, it did not look like ink. It was brown and had little chunks in it. And it looked more like, to me, it like sprayed poop at me. And it caught me off guard. I was like, whoa, and I pulled back. And then I was like, oh no, I don't want to lose the octopus. And then I, kind of regrouped and tried to see it. And it was totally gone. I had no idea of where to even start looking. And so its defense mechanism was effective against me, I guess. But it did not look like ink. It looked like poop. All right, and on that note, we're going to stop the video there because I think it's getting long enough where we need to stop it. Okay.